I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Slice a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, the first of back-to-back days this week, as we are going to be continuing to tear through the division previews. We also have teams reporting en masse to training camps, which is always a lot of fun. Gives us plenty of news, so I will kick it off there. Dennis, kind of, I guess, a mild surprise. The Seahawks released tight end Noah Fant. I'm guessing the immediate benefit would probably be to Elijah Arroyo, although AJ Barner is still there. What do you think it does for the Seahawks? And are you thinking Fant's going to catch on somewhere?
Yeah, I think he'll get an opportunity. He's certainly not going to be handed anything, but somebody will bring him in. He's a good enough athlete. And I don't think he's got any lingering injuries. So he'll end up somewhere. I think it is a weird situation when they don't really have a ton of depth in their receiving core. So it felt like Fant was kind of poised to maybe be the number 2 receiver there. But it's going to be JSN, Cooper Kupp if he can stay healthy. They're fighting over, like I hear a lot of talk that's basically don't invest too early, see who wins the slot job because that's the guy you want. Well, I think that Kupp and JSN are both going to get a significant amount of targets. I think they'll rotate in and out of the slot. But I would expect probably JSN to spend a little more time on the outside. But with the fit of Kenneth Walker in that offense, I think there'll be a little bit of run heavy. I think they'll use Zach Charbonnet plenty. But I would expect Sam Darnold's going to be probably in the bottom third in pass attempts. So does it make sense to get rid of Noah Fant? AJ Barner played well. Elijah Arroyo, while having a little bit of an injury history in college, was probably the best tight end at the Senior Bowl, if not one of the better players at the Senior Bowl, according to Joe Dolan over at Fantasy Points. So, you got to make some decisions, and I guess they just felt like Fant didn't really fit their program. But, yeah, I expect him to catch on somewhere as a backup.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Fant ends up. Last year, the New Orleans Saints, which is where Clint Kubiak was, had 551 pass attempts. They were 16th in the NFL in that category. So more middle of the pack, but, we'll see how it shakes out. You're right. Can Cooper Kupp stay healthy? How quickly does Barner or Arroyo develop? How many YOLO balls a game are they throwing to MVS? These are the fun questions, but they do have 2 good running backs. I'm a little surprised. I actually thought Fant would be more interesting as like a sleeper low end tight end 2 candidate this year, because tight ends in a Kubiak Shanahan offense have often done pretty well. But they must like what they've got. And, we talked about earlier this offseason, they were rolling when the season ended with a primary offense that were all coming into contract years. And they have since moved on from everyone that's in a contract year except for Ken Walker. So if I was Walker, I'd start feeling a little nervous because they got rid of Metcalf. They let Lockett go. They traded Geno. They have now released Noah Fant. So they're making some wholesale sweeping changes. I guess the question too is whether their offense ends up better as a result. I'm a little dubious at this point. Another wide receiver who is staying away is Terry McLaurin. He went from saying he has no intention of leaving, he just wants a new contract, to saying that, he would be open to a trade if that's what it takes to get a contract, to now just not showing up. Should we start to be a little concerned here?
Well, I think you're always warranted being concerned when your number one non-quarterback offensive player is disgruntled and away from camp. And Terry McLaurin is that guy. I mean, they have a very pedestrian running game.
I was going to say, unlike Seattle, Robinson, they can't lean on a great running back.
Chris Rodriguez. Deebo Samuel has had some moments, but, is he really a guy you think can carry your offense? I don't think so. We've seen Noah Brown have like 2 or 3 great games over the course of his 7-year career. He isn't the guy. I don't think Luke McCaffrey is that guy. Zach Ertz is, I think him and I are in the same senior golf league. Ben Sinnott hasn't stepped up and really earned a significant amount. It's Terry McLaurin who is, the guy that's not Jaden Daniels in that offense, and they need him, whether they want to admit it or not. I get it. He's pushing 30 or right around 30. He wants something secure. Like this will be his 3rd contract there, I think. I think they get it worked out. I don't think missing a week at the beginning of training camp, or 10 days even, is going to be a big detriment to him. He's not a guy that tends to get overweight and be susceptible to hamstring injuries or anything like that. He's 6'1", 6 foot, 200-pounder with 4.3 speed, great hands. I think they get it done. Now, if we got, 1 game left in the preseason and he's still out, then I'm really sweating it. That now it's like, because he's talking, I'm willing to hold out. But, we see it all the time. Early on, people are very blustery, but ultimately I think they get it taken care of, and they recognize that, if they want Jaden Daniels to take another step, having Terry McLaurin there on the other end of the ball is a high on your to-do list.
So a bit of sad news for you. Levi Wasserike is
the only guy who stayed healthy last year?
Out for the season. Injuries were a crippling effect, especially on defense for the Lions last season. Does this give you a bit of pause as we haven't even begun the season? So
it does, from the perspective of, he was a big contributor. Now we got Aleem McNeil coming back off of an injury. We got DJ Reader, the veteran Roy Lopez, and they invested a 1st-round pick in Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. So they do have some depth at the interior of their line. With Aiden Hutchinson coming back, Marcus Davenport back, I would like there to be a little more explosive depth at the defensive end position. I don't think Josh Paschal is really explosive. I think he's fine. I don't know too much about Al-Qadim Muhammad, who backs up Davenport, but is a street free agent last year. I'm going to guess, there's a reason he was a street free agent. So losing Onwuzurike, or however you pronounce it.
Onwuzurike, I think.
Yeah, for the year is concerning, if for no other reason than we saw last year how quickly a really, really good defense can become a bad defense when you get hit by a string of injuries.
Yeah, definitely a concern. Well, our last piece of news, I'll mention it briefly, but we'll probably talk about it more in depth since it pertains to one of the teams we're talking about tonight in the AFC South, and that is Will Levis, the quarterback, apparently injuring his shoulder last September 30th. Limped his way in and out of the lineup throughout the season, was competing for the number one spot with Cam Ward in training camp, has now elected to, well, I mean, they were splitting first team reps, so has now elected for season-ending shoulder surgery, will be out for the year. Really clarifies things because Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle, career backups, are the other quarterbacks on the roster. So probably good news for Cam Ward. I don't think we were counting on Will Levis for a lot this year. Probably not counting on Will Levis for a lot any year going forward, but at least provide some clarity as we get ready to preview the team. The Titans doing us a favor. Most of these teams have waited to drop a bombshell piece of roster news until like the episode after we've previewed their team.
So. Yeah, no, it's interesting that he waited, 10 months?
Well, it says this decision was made with the team's encouragement and blessing to look after his long-term future. And I don't know if they mean, we think that you could end up being our Gary Kubiak to John Elway here for years to come. So we want you to get this fixed.
And it's not uncommon if you're trying to, we know NFL players have a certain machismo to them. They play a very physical sport. Yes, even the quarterbacks. And so they'll try to play through these different types of injuries and kind of push through these things. And, he wasn't terribly accurate coming into the NFL, and then getting a shoulder injury. It may be, in his best interest to take a year off, get the shoulder surgery, get rehab. Does that mean he's going to all of a sudden show up next fall to camp and be a 70% completion rate guy? Probably not. But, we saw Josh Allen take big leaps with his completion percentage. Levis is known for having a big arm. Maybe it does him good. Maybe it puts him in a position, like you said, to develop as a trusted backup. And then when his rookie contract is up, to get a shot to go somewhere else and maybe win a starting job if Cam Ward pans out.
Yeah, it's just and it's
maybe
also
just rub a little mayo on it and get going.
Well, I was thinking it's also possible it was bothering him throughout the season, and he thought, maybe going through the off season would make it better. And then they went to mini camp and he was throwing reps and went right back to some issues. And I was like, well, this is not one that's getting better on rest. I mean, we don't know the whole thing. It was definitely interesting timing, but
yeah,
does help us as we go. We continue our previews here with the AFC South. Going in order of finish, the lone playoff team, first place finisher last year, was the 10-7 Houston Texans. Among the people that rotated away from them, veteran quarterback Case Keenum, who's now in Chicago, Stephon Diggs, the wide receiver, who is with the Patriots, wide receiver Robert Woods, who is now elevated all the way to wide receiver 2 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, linebacker Devin White, and cornerback Jeff Okudah. Among their additions in the draft, they picked up wide receiver Jaden Higgins, picked up wide receiver Jalen Noel, running back Woody Marks. They picked up free agent running back Nick Chubb, tackle Trent Brown, Mario Edwards, and Sheldon Rankin on the defensive line, Ronald Darby at the corner. Fantasy finishes, CJ Stroud, a little bit of a come down in year 2 was quarterback 18. Not terrible, but also missing a lot of weapons in and out of the lineup. Joe Mixon, a good addition, finished as running back 17, also missed some time last year. Nico Collins, wide receiver 23. He, again, another player, you're catching a theme here, missed a little time last year. And Dalton Schultz was tight end 20. Tank Dell probably not going to play this year. They've yet to put him on that ending PUP list, but with the horrific leg injury to end a second consecutive season, he's not expected to play. Probably a lot of Collins and rookie Jaden Higgins. They added Christian Kirk, I forgot, in trade as well from the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Jalen Noel. So they kind of rebuilt that. They added Chubb to add depth in the backfield. How do you feel about this offense?
Well, I think the passing game is going to run through Nico Collins. He was on pace for, if he had played 17 games last year, he'd have been at about 140 targets. And that was, that's a significant season. He had 1,300 yards in 15 games in 2023, 7 touchdowns last year. I think he's got really good chemistry with C.J. Stroud. I don't know where we're going with Christian Kirk. Sorry, name escaped me. He's just...
It escaped me so much that I forgot to put him on. I was thinking, I was like, don't they have somebody else? Oh, yeah, they traded for Christian Kirk.
He had... Kirk is really... he plays the slot well, but he's always been kind of stubborn and wants to be an outside receiver, because they're the ones who typically are getting paid and getting all the glory. So I get it, but he was miscast in that role in Arizona. He was miscast in that role in Jacksonville. He's not going to play outside with Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins there. Even Tank Dell at 5'8" and 175 pounds was a better outside receiver than Christian Kirk was. But I think the Texans have some depth. I think if I'm gonna go and probably bet on a second receiver, let's see where. See, Kirk is going at wide receiver 58 in redraft, and Higgins at wide receiver 51. Honestly, I think I would bet on Kirk in that. Around what's that, about just about 2 rounds later for Christian Kirk than Jaden Higgins. I think that's a much better value. I think Higgins has the opportunity to have some blow-up games, but I don't think he's going to be quite as consistent. He will give you a better ceiling than Christian Kirk, but I think ultimately Higgins is going to need to have Nico Collins maybe miss some games to get a consistently high target share. And then you've got Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb in the backfield now, who are both big backs that can grind up carries and eat the clock. So the potential is there for them to shorten games and maybe run fewer plays because of their ability in the ground game. Now, Mixon isn't terribly efficient. He was RB17 last year. He's being drafted at RB19 this year, pick number 60. I think that's a reasonable spot for him. I don't think I didn't add Chubb to this yet. But Chubb, coming back from the injury, I'm a little bit nervous. There's a side of me that says, well, hey, it's Nick Chubb. He's going to be just fine. But there's also the side of me that says, pretty much everybody that comes back from an injury, it takes them a season of not quite being as explosive, not quite being as good as you would hope they would be. So let me see if I can see where Chubb was going. I don't even see him. He wasn't really even being drafted at that point. So I like Jaden Higgins long term, but he's definitely he's the T Higgins, but he needs Christian Kirk to go away completely. He needs to be the T Higgins to Jamar Chase and Nico Collins. He needs Christian Kirk to go away.
Which, may not be too hard to do. Christian Kirk has missed 14 games the last 2 seasons. He is not really a player that I would be betting on or taking in redraft. I like Higgins better as a Dynasty prospects probably then year one. I think Schultz is pretty locked into where he is. He had 89 targets and 50 something receptions both of his last 2 years with Houston. Had that same eerily similar stat line his last year in Dallas too. He's kind of is what he is and going to fill in. If you were looking for a deep sleeper dart throw, I think I'd be more interested in Jalen Noel than Christian Kirk because I don't trust Kirk to stay healthy. And I think there's a possibility that he ends up coming into that space and doing some good things. We saw Tank Dell at times being the little slithery receiver in there, picking stuff up. His rookie year, they had a great connection. Last year, they had a good connection at times before he got hurt.
Yeah, I could see Noel if Kirk misses time. I could see Noel Wally Pippin him. Kind of stepping in and performing to the point where they say, we really need to keep this guy on the field.
Well, in Kirk, I believe I'm looking at it right now. I believe he's on the final year of his contract anyway, so it felt like a 1 year rental. Yeah, so he's a free agent at the end of this year, and he's not very expensive this year. It looks like it would cost them more to cut him than to keep him. He's less than $5 million on the roster, but it'd be 14.5 dead cap. So I think he's just a 1 year rental, gives them some veteran depth, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see the rookies pick up a little bit as we're going through. I think still though, if you're looking for, especially in redraft, solid performers. I think Stroud still is a QB2 for me. I like Mixon in mid to upper RB2 range, kind of where he was last year. And Collins, I think Collins has great upside. The rest of them, if you're taking Higgins, even where I have him in Dynasty, I'm not hoping that he's starting for me week one. But if I was going to take a dart throw, I just think I would take a last bench spot on Noel over Christian Kirk because that 14 missed games. And he didn't look good.
Noel is going wide receiver 76, pick 182. So there's value there as opposed to taking Christian Kirk at pick 121. So you're going 60 picks later.
He played 8 games, only caught 27 passes for 379 yards and a touchdown last year. Just really, it looks like his catch rate was only 48.9%. And I know they had some offense and quarterback problems, but even his best season, his catch percentage was only 60%. He's been upper 40s or low 50s 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his 7 seasons. So it's just not the guy I'm taking my shot with. The second place team in the division, another really interesting one. They have a lot of pieces we'd love to have in fantasy, but they have one gaping question mark on their roster, and that is the Indianapolis Colts. They finished 8-9 last year. Joe Flacco left them, went back to Cleveland. Sam Ehlinger left, went to Denver. Ryan Kelly, the center, is gone. Trey Sermon, the running back, left. And Kylan Granson, one of their 875 tight ends, also left. This offseason, they added Daniel Jones at quarterback, which is more important than you might have realized. They added Khalil Herbert and DJ Giddens to the backfield. Spent a high draft pick on tight end Tyler Warren, and they brought in cornerback Charvarius Ward. Last year, Anthony Richardson finished his quarterback 25 in and out of the lineup. Jonathan Taylor was running back 12. Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver 41. Josh Downs, wide receiver 35. Alec Pierce, wide receiver 43. Kind of all of them bunched up there. They also have Adonai Mitchell, didn't make a huge dent last year, and they have Tyler Warren. But again, quarterback, a question. Anthony Richardson already injured, not participating yet in training camp. It's looking more likely that Daniel Jones will be the week 1 starter. I expect both quarterbacks will play at some point during the season. And unless Daniel Jones is the second coming of 2024 Sam Darnold, I have a feeling that there are going to be a lot of receivers and tight end pieces that are on rosters that aren't doing you any favors in 2025.
Yeah, it's near impossible to draft any Colts pass catcher as a starter with any amount of confidence whatsoever. I mean, if you're drafting like Pittman, like his draft position isn't awful. Wide receiver 49, pick 93. He's clearly way more talented than that. So it's built in that Richardson or Jones is going to be the quarterback. And Jones he's been okay in the past. I don't know, when his confidence goes, it goes, and he becomes a turnover machine. Richardson is just so inconsistent. They're going at QB 29 and QB 30, 6 picks apart. And it's hard. Like Josh Downs, wide receiver 45, Pittman, wide receiver 49, Pierce, wide receiver 73. Warren is going at tight end 10. Warren has top 5 tight end potential, but you just don't have any, like, if you drafted him at tight end 10 and he finished at tight end 15 with the quarterback situation there, I think you would be like, yeah, I knew that was within the realm of possibilities. I knew drafting him that there's the talent's there, but he may not be startable because of the QB situation.
Yeah, I feel like Pittman and Downs are probably in that like flex range, which is a disappointment considering where you have them in the potential. Like Michael Pittman, I thought prior to last year when their quarterback situation went into the toilet was tracking to me like, he was moving on to top 12 wide receiver range. And, he's got good talent. He's under a good contract, but their passing game is so up in the air. And that's what gives me misgivings, too, about bringing in Tyler Warren. Last year, we thought Alec Pierce was going to be dead because they brought in Adonai Mitchell. And yet Pierce had probably his best season as a pro because he got enough of those YOLO balls.
Right.
But is Daniel Jones throwing those YOLO balls? What is Tyler Warren
Not
doing?
Historically.
I mean, the other thing, Josh Downs did really well catching a lot of underneath consistency. If Tyler Warren starts breaking out, won't those two hurt each other? So I'm with you. Like Jonathan Taylor, I know I want, and I think he has great upside. I'm probably rostering those quarterbacks as a quarterback 3 or 4 in Superflex, not counting on them, just waiting to see what happens. And the wide receivers, I have Pittman in a couple places. I have Downs in a couple places. They're kind of in that flex range for me, but I just feel sad based on what could be.
Right. I get it. They should be in the market for a quarterback next year, unless Richardson takes some monster step this year. I don't think Jones is the long-term answer. I don't think Jones is the short-term answer. It really, in situations. So a couple of years ago, I made several moves to go get Anthony Richardson. And now this offseason, in those spots where I have Anthony Richardson, I'm trying to do 2 things. 1, ensure that Richardson is no higher than my QB3, and 2, get Daniel Jones so that I have both of them. So at least I have a QB3 that I can start for 2 weeks a year.
Mm-hmm. And Jones only on a 1-year contract. So I think the question is how the Colts finish, because they're one of those teams that's kind of been in no man's land in the middle of the pack. They were 9-8 the first year under Steichen, 8-9 last year. They're the definition of mediocre at 17-17. They have pieces on defense and all over the offense where you think they could compete, but they're getting kind of killed in that one crucial position. Richardson didn't play a lot his rookie year, and it was up to Captain Jorts Gardner Minshew, who kept him in it and was all right. Last year, they bounced back and forth between Richardson and Flacco. Neither of them was incredibly impressive when they were out there. If they have another season like that, can they bottom out enough to go get a quarterback? it doesn't seem like free agency's been a great place for them. So just
Now,
kind of.
I will say the one move that I did like from them was the signing of Khalil Herbert. Now, I don't expect him to get a lot of run if everything goes like it's supposed to. But if you're in a zero RB mode, Khalil Herbert's one of those guys that if Jonathan Taylor gets injured, he can step in and carry the load. I would think he would get 80% of the workload that Jonathan Taylor has. He'll cede some work to DJ Giddens or Tyler Goodson, but I think he's the better of all of their backups and probably better than the backups they've had the last couple years to Taylor. So I do like that move. He's going at RB 90, pick 306, or basically undrafted, versus DJ Giddens, the rookie, at RB 60, going at pick 194. So give me Khalil Herbert there all day.
The number 3 team in that division was the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they were abysmal, 4-13. Among the players left, Mac Jones left to be the backup in San Francisco. They released wide receiver Gabe Davis, who remains unsigned. Wide receiver Christian Kirk was traded to the Texans. Tight end Evan Ingram was released, signed with the Broncos, and they let go of cornerback Ronald Darby. They brought in Nick Mullins to be one of their backup quarterbacks. They brought in De'Ami Brown from the Commanders at receiver, drafted Travis Hunter, who's going to play receiver and corner, and Baishal Tutin at running back. They brought in a couple of tight ends, including Johnny Munt. Last year, Trevor Lawrence fantasy finish was quarterback 27. He only played in 10 games, so not too terrible for 10 games, but not too great. Travis Etienne was running back 35. Tank Bigsby took a big year to leap and went to running back 36. Rookie wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., probably the best thing about the team, was wide receiver 4 last year, and Brenton Strange, tight end 31's, a lot of time filling in for Evan Ingram. So, new coach, new outlook, same kind of muddled backfield. They have Brian Thomas. Now they have Travis Hunter, Brenton Strange out there. How are you feeling about this Jacksonville team?
I have mixed emotions. You know, I like Tank Bigsby. He's one of those throwback old school tough guys. I love the way he bounced back from probably one of the most abysmal rookie seasons I think we've seen. He had a good year last year, and it feels like I don't really know what's going to happen with the running backs in Jacksonville. Bigsby's kind of is who he is. He's maybe just slightly less than capable as a pass catcher. Travis Etienne is a decent pass catcher, and he's fast, but he doesn't have great vision, and he doesn't have much lateral movement at all. Baishal Tutin comes in, quite a good athlete, but he's a rookie, fast, 4'3". I guess we have to see how he transitions to the NFL. LaQuint Allen, just a slightly bigger version, not quite as fast, of Baishal Tutin. So Bigsby is probably the guy I like, but Travis Etienne going at RB 33 kind of feels like a value, almost pick 100, pick 98. If you're waiting a little bit on running backs, there is certainly some upside there. I don't know if we're ever going to see the Trevor Lawrence breakout, but you got to think that this is the year. I mean, Liam Cohen is there. Liam Cohen's there. Brian Thomas Jr. had a great season. I think Travis Hunter plays 90% of his snaps at wide receiver. I think basically they play him on defense enough to shut him up. And, you know, they'll let him make some plays, but by and large, he has the potential to be a top 10 wide receiver, and he can be a very good cornerback too. I just don't think, even as good a shape as he is in, you just can't hold up for that number of snaps in the NFL. He'll do it for a while. He'll have a couple games where he plays a lot. I just don't think you want to risk him. Trevor Lawrence going off the board at QB 19. I think I'm okay drafting him in the back half of the QB2s. When he's got weapons like Hunter and Brian Thomas, we've seen Liam Cohen offenses really support two high-end wide receivers. Baker Mayfield did really well under Liam Cohen. He comes from that Sean McVay tree, so I think he's going to have a fairly narrow funnel when it comes to the receivers. That's always a positive. Brenton Strange is going to take over for Evan Ingram. Strange going at tight end 19. He's got tight end 1 upside. So if you're picking, pick 164 and you're looking to grab a couple low-end tight ends to see who breaks out, Brenton Strange is a pretty good target. That being said, once you get past Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter, that wide receiver group gets a little bit dicey. De'Ami Brown is the third starter. Then you got Josh Cephas, Austin Trammell, and Parker Washington. Cephas out of Wisconsin. I think he was with the Lions for a little bit. Not a fast guy. He's a 4'6" guy, good size. Trammell, I don't think is really, he hasn't done much. He was with the Rams for a bit. Parker Washington really feels like a special teams guy. So they don't have a whole lot of depth at wide receiver, in my opinion.
Washington did see 51 targets last year, though, 32 receptions, 390 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Started 7 games, so has a little bit of experience. He's not a guy I'm taking in fantasy. I'm honestly not real high on De'Ami Brown. I've seen some people are like, well, he's going to have like 800 yards and 8 touchdowns this year.
I'm not high enough to be high on De'Ami Brown.
Their backfield is a real mystery. I think I'd prefer Bigsby because Travis Etienne, you're right, was just 3.6 yards per carry. He did okay receiving wise, but he was almost a yard per carry worse than Bigsby, who ended up having 18 more carries and more than 200 more yards. Bigsby was averaging 4.6 yards per carry, 3.7 for ATN. That's just not great. 150 carries, 558 yards. Trevor Lawrence in 10 games as the quarterback had more rushing touchdowns than Travis Etienne did last year. He did catch 39 passes, not a very impressive per reception average. Bigsby actually had a better per reception average, which is amusing. Neither of them really caught touchdowns. I think, I have some interest in Brenton Strange as a high-end tight end too. I really love Brian Thomas. I think Travis Hunter is going to end up being serviceable, in that flex range of wide receivers. Trevor Lawrence is the real question to me because this team's going to go as Trevor Lawrence can go. He's now on his, third coach. So
that's never good.
Never good. And
maybe he's down there in Florida. Maybe he's calling up Baker Mayfield and getting together and, getting lessons on how do you deal with constant coaching turnover.
Well, and I just think he probably is what he is, which is an uninspiring low-end QB2. I think Liam Cohen's going to miss the running backs and the quarterback that he had in Tampa Bay. Brian Thomas Jr. might be better than any single Bucs receiver, but that Bucs offense was really good. And I don't know if this Jaguars offense is going to be good. I don't know if this team is capable of pulling it out. They've been kind of middling, so we'll see. The question is whether they can be better than the team that was the 4th place team last year, and that was the Tennessee Titans. 3-14 actually earned the number 1 overall pick. Among their losses, quarterback Mason Rudolph left to go back to Pittsburgh. Wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikini went to Miami, and linebacker Harold Landry is gone. They brought in Cam Ward as the number 1 overall pick at quarterback. They added veteran wide receivers in Tyler Lockett and Van Jefferson, and rookie wide receivers in Shamir DK and Alec Aomanor. They also added guard Kevin Zeitler, tight end Gunnar Helm, and defensive end Draymond Jones. Last year, Will Levis, who is out for the year, was quarterback 30. Tony Pollard, who came over as a free agent, running back 21. Tyjae Spears, who had trouble staying on the field, was running back 42. Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 28, not too bad as their number one guy, and tight end Chiga Okonkwo plugging along at tight end 21. We know it's going to be Cam Ward's team. They may nominally have better receivers, although at the beginning of last season, they started with Tyler Boyd and DeAndre Hopkins flanking Calvin Ridley, and now they're tracking to be an aging Tyler Lockett and maybe Van Jefferson, maybe a rookie. So how are you feeling about this offense?
Tony Pollard had 180 more carries than Tyjae Spears. Spears missed 5 games. I think Ridley he's pretty much, it's him and Chiga Okonkwo, because we don't know what Tyler Lockett still has left, Van Jefferson. It's going to be an interesting it's an uninspiring group of receivers. They're hoping for, a couple 4th rounders in DK and Aomanor, and then an undrafted free agent in Xavier Restrepo to take a giant step and to really push the wide receiver group. Restrepo has chemistry with Cam Ward. They played together last year in college, but that he ran he was slower than Keenan Allen in the 40. At least Keenan Allen was 6'3". Restrepo was 5'10", and so he's a pure slot guy that you're hoping is gonna, keep churning those 7-yard receptions into first downs and stuff. Whether or not he actually pulls that off, going to be another complete question mark. Aomanor is, I think he's either out of Cal or Stanford, I forget which.
Stanford.
Had an okay college career. The one thing that really stood out was he completely destroyed Travis Hunter. He had a game where he just dominated Travis Hunter. But the rest of his career was just had some good games, but, it's like, can he put it together and rise to the level of that Travis Hunter game on a more consistent basis? He's got good size. He's got good speed. If he can, he'll supplant Van Jefferson very quickly and really provide some support to Calvin Ridley. Chiga Okonkwo, very, very athletic tight end, just hasn't ever had any consistency. I like Pollard, what he's been doing. I think they wanted to have a little more balance between him and Spears, but Spears just has not shown himself to be able to stay healthy. So I would still expect Pollard to be over 200 carries again, 225. He's a good receiving back. The skill set between him and Spears aren't that different, so they're kind of interchangeable. They're not necessarily, a 2-down banger and a 3rd-down guy. They're both guys that can catch the ball, can pass protect okay, can run pretty well inside. They're Khalil Mullings and Julius Chestnut are going to kind of fight to be that third guy, to be that guy that gets you 1 yard on 3rd and 1. They're not really going to be fantasy relevant. With Will Levis going out, I wouldn't be surprised to see them make a move for a veteran quarterback with a little more upside than Brandon Allen or Tim Boyle. Who is that? I don't know, but
they bring back Ryan Tannehill.
I think if he was going to come back, he would have.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of guys on the free agent market, and I don't know how many.
No, they're going to have to wait for somebody to get cut or somebody to be available via trade. Ridley, wide receiver 32. I think that's reasonable value. I don't hate that he's picked 57. I don't hate that value.
I think the question is, are they going to throw more? Because I think a question is, are they going to throw more? Last year they had 530 pass attempts, which was only 23rd in the NFL, and they were 26th in the NFL in passing yardage. Levis wasn't great, but Mason Rudolph, I think we more charitably remember. He wasn't that much better. Only 64%, 1,500 yards, 9 TDs, 9 interceptions in his 8 games, 5 starts. So, maybe it's. I'm trying to figure out what kind of offense Brian Callahan wants to run. Maybe he just wants to have somebody who's successful, and he hasn't had that yet. But they were not a very robust passing game, and 120 targets for Calvin Ridley last year, only was able to catch 64 of them, which is not a great percentage, which probably speaks a little more to his quarterback play than him, but it's definitely a concern.
I think the wild card is going to be Cam Ward. So he started 38 games at the major college level. I'm not sure how many games he started at Incarnate Word, but he had a 66% completion percentage at Washington State and Miami. Threw for over 11,000 yards in those 3 seasons. He had 39 touchdowns and 7 interceptions last year. So his ability to pick up new offenses and handle adversity could bode well. I'm going to keep going back. It'll be years that I keep going back to Brock Purdy coming in as a very late pick, last pick in the draft. Him, Bo Nix, these guys that play a lot of games in college, see a lot of different things, get a lot of reps, handle a lot of adversity, and then they come in. They're not necessarily super high draft picks. Nix was pretty high, but they can come in, and because they've been through a lot, they're able to transition to the NFL. It takes them less time for the game to slow down for them. And we'll have to see in his rookie season here how that works with Cam Ward. How does he, move into that Brian Callahan offense and be able to, make the right reads, make the right plays, get them in the right play, read the defense adequately, because he's had that. Ward has had to fight his way through college, and he's played 5 years in college, started 50 games, somewhere in that range. The opportunity, there's probably a pretty high chance that he can be more middle of the pack this year than, say, bottom 8.
Yeah. So I guess that brings us to, as we have with all of these previews, how do you feel about the AFC South?
I could use a Rolaids.
At least this is none of your favorite teams. I guess for me, I think Jacksonville and Tennessee will be better, and I think Jacksonville will. I think both of them will be closer to the 500 mark, maybe one a little bit over. I still think Houston wins the division, but Jacksonville maybe gives them more competition. The one that I think might actually bottom out is the Colts, and I think it's that quarterback situation is holding them back. And
yeah, the hard thing is that Steichen had his chance to draft a rookie quarterback high. He picked Anthony Richardson, and I guess you can debate if that was the right way to go or not. It doesn't look like it in hindsight. I don't know that if they don't do well this year, that he has the cachet to get another shot at drafting a quarterback high.
Well, so he had no shot at Stroud and Young, who were already gone. Was there a quarterback behind? I'm trying to think who was the other quarterbacks in that class.
See, what year was that? That was
2023 NFL draft. I'm looking it up. Yeah, I also, some of the questions I have are whether that was who he wanted or is that who the front, because it seemed like the front office really wanted him. So the other quarterbacks in that class, Will Levis, that would not have been a better pick. Hendon Hooker, who we don't know, Jay Kaner, Aiden O'Connell, Stetson Bennett, Clayton Toon, Dorian Thompson Robinson, Sean Clifford, Jaron Hall, Tanner McKee, and Max Dugan. I mean, they could have not taken a quarterback, but they had tried for years bringing in that aging veteran that hadn't worked for them either. They had no shot at Stroud or Young, so Richardson probably was the best of the available options, because I don't think, you wouldn't have spent pick 4 on Will Levis or Hendon Hooker, who you knew wasn't really going to play that first year coming off the injury. None of those guys have really broken out, so I don't know if we can be too critical of who he didn't take in that draft.
Yeah, and even if they waited till the following year, they were pick 15. Does that mean they wouldn't have been higher if they hadn't drafted Richardson? Who knows?
Well, it was Minshew that got them to 9 wins. Richardson only played 2.5 games. So,
right.
Minshew was the free agent that they had been able to acquire before the draft. So, I guess if Daniel Jones bounces back in a big way, maybe they do well. But I just have a sneaking suspicion that Tennessee is going to be better with their franchise quarterback, not a playoff contender, but better. And that the Colts might be the ones that, they also have lost pieces the last few years from that offensive line. Like before picking Richardson, you would have said offensive line was their one greatest strength, and they have steadily ebbed apart pieces. Now they have a really deep wide receiving group, and they have now a great tight end. But what does that get you if you don't have a great line and you don't have anything at quarterback? So, I mean, they ended up having to settle for Daniel Jones. It appeared that they tried to make offers for Darnold's and for a couple of other guys that were out there. So I'm taking it that there were some of the better veterans on the market that were like, I don't want to go there, because that's where people go.
So then, do you think Steichen survives a shitty season?
So there's a lot of turmoil in that organization too, which is another reason I don't have a good feeling about this season, because obviously their owner died.
Right.
And now his daughters have taken over, and you get a real female Jerry Jones vibe from a lady who spent last season cutting her teeth by going on the sideline, putting on a headset and giving input to the coaches during the game. I mean, that's Jerry Jones is probably like, God, I wish I would have bought the team during the headset era, so that he could have been down there. So that gives me pause. We have seen coaches survive bad organizational situations. I think the one that's probably more on the hot seat than Steichen is Chris Ballard, who has not been able to solve that quarterback since Andrew Luck retired. I mean, they took big swings with Jacoby Brissett and then Phillip Rivers, then Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. Then, he moved. I'm pretty sure he moved up to take Anthony Richardson, but they couldn't get to the top 2, and that hasn't really panned out. Then they couldn't get anybody. They've let other pieces go. Their defense has never been great, but Steichen, Jonathan Gannon, 2 guys that were hot coordinators from the Eagles who went to teams. Neither of those teams do I think are going to make the playoffs now in year 3 for both of them. What does happen? It's a good question. You don't usually get a long runway if you're not making progress. And
now I will say, I was listening to Jeff Mans on Sirius XM this afternoon, and he lives out there in Phoenix. He was saying that, one of the things that Gannon has had to deal with is that he runs a different style defense than the team he inherited. And so he has spent the last 2 years reconfiguring the defensive personnel to accommodate his defense. And so he said he expects a step up from the Arizona defense. He didn't say anything about, Kyler Murray or anything. He was just talking about because Gannon came from the defensive side of the ball. So, but I agree with you. And Gannon may be in that situation where like he's saddled with Kyler Murray. They've paid Murray. It's not going to be easy for him to move on from Kyler Murray. That being said, if he can get his defense to play well enough, then maybe he can, go conservative and cover it up.
Well, and a lot of times when you have like an ownership change or something, the coach and a lot of people get like an all skate for a year. I mean, we even saw that we didn't think Ron Rivera was getting through with the Commanders, but when they did their ownership change, he remained for another year longer than what we were expecting. So, that is the real unknown for the Colts too. But I still think Texans win, and that only one team from this division makes the playoffs. And we'll see if the Texans can do better in the playoffs too. It kind of feels like a division that where getting to the playoffs is you're going to be your victory, because I don't know that I think any of these teams are Super Bowl contenders when I stack them against a Kansas City or a Buffalo or Baltimore or Cincinnati, or even emerging teams like Denver, or we could see better season from New England, who we're going to talk about. Pittsburgh has tried to put all the pieces in place to make a run. It's the AFC is very top heavy, and I think Jacksonville and Tennessee will make strides. I have a good feeling about the Colts, and I think Tennessee will continue, or Houston will continue to be good enough.
Yeah, Houston. The thing I struggle with Houston is right now it feels like DeMeco Ryans is a get the team to the playoffs. He's kind of like Marvin Lewis, get the team to the playoffs semi-frequently, but just can't get anything done in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I mean, only 14 teams make the playoffs, so if you get in the dance, you have a shot. So.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us today. You will not have to wait very long. We will be back tomorrow because of scheduling things this week. We will be looking at the NFC East. We only have 2 divisions left. NFC East tomorrow, AFC East next Tuesday, and then next Thursday we will be back looking. We're going to do, I believe, a mock draft to kind of get ready for redraft season. Then we'll start doing our redraft rankings, because training camp actually for pretty much all teams is beginning this week.
26 teams reported today.
Yeah, so we're in the thick of it. Next Thursday is actually the first preseason game, as hard as it is to believe. So we'll look at a mock draft. It'll be a lot of fun. But we will be back tomorrow talking NFC East. Until then, hope you guys have a wonderful evening.
Well, before we get out, I just want to say one quick thing. As an old metalhead, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the passing of the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne. Seen Ozzy in concert several times, and he always put on a great show. Black Sabbath was a huge influence on me musically. Ozzy Osbourne's solo career, huge influence on me musically. So, R.I.P. to the Prince of Darkness.
Well, way to bring down the energy, as if the AFC South couldn't do that. So, but we will be looking at a better division tomorrow, the NFC East. So we will see you then. Until then, have a wonderful night.